She just sold her company. She sat in a room full of men negotiating the biggest deal of her lifetime. Wait, she sold for how much? I can't even believe she managed to get double her valuation. Let's keep this just between us.
Hey, 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 I am so excited for this episode because Lindsay Pinchuk is spilling the tea, baby. She launched the Bump Club, which she bootstrapped. It was all like a whole community for expectant mothers. And she had this fantastic background in media sales, and she used it to bring in sponsors and all of this great stuff. And then she has this great exit with this great valuation. And it just has this one little problem, which is that there is an earnout that becomes completely and totally impossible to meet. And so she's going to tell you all about it. The raw, candid truth of earnouts gone wrong. Take a listen. Welcome, Lindsay, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Carrie. It's an honor to be here.
I'm so excited to be here with you. I'm excited to talk about Bump Club, first of all. So let's talk about how you got the idea to start this, how this all came to be, and where you took it. Start with the idea. How did this happen?
So it was so funny. My husband and I were actually in Argentina. I was not pregnant yet. We were like talking about starting a family. And I said to my husband, there really is nothing in Chicago for expectant moms to meet each other. And I said, and that seems crazy to me because I have like all these questions even before we're pregnant. And I started just having this idea. And I actually had my computer with me, which I don't know why, because at the time
computer in Argentina.
I don't even know why, but like I was working, for a corporation at the time, and we were on this last hurrah trip before our baby, and before we decided to get pregnant. And I kind of was just like, I'm gonna like noodle around on this. There has to be some kind of community for expectant parents. And the only thing in Chicago at the time really was yoga classes, and they were at like 4 and 5 o'clock in the neighborhoods, not in the loop. So if you worked, you really couldn't participate in those. So fast forward, we luckily got pregnant pretty fast, and I was like, I have to meet other pregnant women. I was the only one who was pregnant of my friends at the time. Meanwhile, we all have 7th graders or rising 8th graders. I was just first. And so, I said I need to like host some events or something. I had a background in ad sales, and I just kind of started reaching out to people, and I ended up reaching out to a fitness studio that I was taking classes at. It was very prenatal safe. And she agreed to host an event with me. And at the time, there was no social media. I emailed everyone that I knew, and I said, we're going to be hosting these events. I hadn't even announced my pregnancy yet. Okay. So like, how weird is that? And I was like, I want to start a community for expectant moms so that when I get pregnant, I have a community. I ended up announcing my pregnancy the week of our first event. And we had this event. We had 50 women come just from word of mouth. And it was very evident that people wanted in-person connection. And so from there, I started hosting events here and there. And about the 3rd or 4th event, it got a little bit more serious. Like we had a ticket option, you had to buy a ticket. We were bringing in speakers. And I was reaching out to brands just saying, would you like to do a giveaway, or would you like to donate to our gift bags? And what ended up happening was one of the brands asked me, like, I want to do more than that. Like you have 50, 60, 75 women coming and paying for these dinners. This is prime engagement for me, for my target consumer. Like, I want to do more. And so given my background, I started putting together packages. And that's how it started. And it really just started as, a couple of events a month. I was pregnant and working in ad sales for Hearst. I was working for Good Housekeeping at the time. And then I had my baby. And when I had my daughter, that was really pivotal for me, because I always say that this company never would have started if it was with my second daughter, because she didn't sleep ever. But my first daughter was like, she would fall asleep all the time. She slept through the night at 8 weeks. I mean, she was like a dream. So I actually did a lot of work while I was on maternity leave. And when I went back to work, I had gotten a new boss, and she was horrible to me. She was recently divorced. She didn't have kids. She was past the age of bearing a child. And, she was very, I think, resentful of me. And she said to me, I heard about your side hustle, and if you do it on my time, there's going to be consequences. And so I knew in that moment that I had to make a decision. And I said to my husband, what's the worst that happens? I come back and get a new job. I took the leap and I left, and I really went all into Bump Club, and that's how it started.
Okay. I have a couple of questions here. First, a comment. I also came from ad sales, and I believe that people who get the experience of working in media ad sales and understand sponsorships at a different level are able to build anything. I really believe it's like the commonality. If you worked in ad sales, that you can build anything.
I agree.
I think so, because you're selling air.
Yes.
You really are. You're just selling audience and air. My one question that I have, first, I love that the idea from this came from a problem that you needed solved, because I always think the best businesses are like, shit, I have this problem. I need to solve it. Let's build a business around that. And so that's beautiful. If your boss, that was difficult, didn't say that to you about the side hustle, do you think you would have continued it as a side hustle, or do you think you would have eventually jumped and done it? What do you think would have happened? Like, let's imagine she wasn't a jerk.
This is a great question. I do think that I would have eventually jumped. I don't think I would have jumped so soon. So prior to her, I had this boss while I was pregnant. He was a male, and he had 5 children, and he just let me do my own thing. And, I ran like a $5 million territory, and I was one of their top performers. So it was silly that you would be such a jerk to me, and it was just kind of dumb. But
it makes no sense. It makes no sense, because with sales, it's all metrics based. If you make your number, go do whatever you want.
And nothing was broken. So my gut when I went back to work was, I'm going to go back to work for as long as I can and see what happens. And I was only there for like 3 weeks. So I think I would have lasted a little bit longer had I not been basically bullied, which I was, I mean, it was like, she really tried to make my life difficult.
I also love the insight about the need to be in person and connected. But one of the challenges with in person that you don't get with online as much is that it is perceived as more difficult to scale. And yet you did. This became one of the businesses that is women run, that is part of the 2% that make it over $1 million in revenue. So talk to me about how it went from an awesome idea with some get-togethers in Chicago and you're having your baby to a 7-figure business.
Essentially, I think at the time, you have to remember there was no social media. So the online options were like meetup.com. And I was basically like, hell no. I'm not finding people through meetup.com. That's weird. I mean, maybe it wasn't, but to me it was. And I wanted the in-person connection. We were transplants in Chicago. We didn't have family here. I needed to build my family, my friends who were family. And that's what I did through Bump Club. And so, initially it was really word of mouth. It was me blogging because there was no social media. But what happened was women would come, they would experience Bump Club. I was very, very meticulous about following up and doing surveys and making changes and giving these women what they wanted. And a lot of it was what I wanted, to the point that as the first kind of group started having our babies, they were like, well, what's next? Are you going to let us continue coming? Because we want to come. And so I wasn't planning to do mom stuff until much later. And I ended up hosting my first mom event 6 weeks postpartum. It was a brunch. I brought in a sleep expert. So it was great for me. It was I was building this as I needed it because of word of mouth and people were having such great experiences at these events. I started getting calls from other cities and from women in other cities who were like, we want to bring Bump Club to our city. At the same time, our events were growing in Chicago. They were very big. They were up to 100, 125 people. We were at max capacity. We often had wait lists for our dinners. And again, it was all word of mouth. It was me being smart about grassroots marketing, which was a very big part of this. I went into all the maternity boutiques, none of which exist anymore, had cards at the register. They were partners of mine. They would send emails on my behalf. And I would drive people into their store. So it was a very big win-win. It was a lot of partnership marketing. And so 2 things happened at first. I had a group of women who became brand ambassadors of Bump Club. And they helped at events. And I paid them not in money, but in product and in free events. Okay. And one of those women said, I'm moving to Austin. Can I take Bump Club with me? I can't live without it. And because she had been a customer of mine and knew everything in and out, I let her do that. And so that was our first additional city was Austin, Texas.
Okay.
I also had a high school friend who lived there who ended up joining her, and she was actually the one who ended up taking it over for the long run. She was my employee for a long time. And then I had a woman from Minneapolis reach out to me, and she was like, all my friends in Chicago are coming to your events. This is now a very dear friend of mine. She's a mom of 4 girls. So at the time she had 1. And she was like, I need to do this. And she flew down on her own dollar and came to one of my big events that year. I taught her how to run it. We had conversations, and she became one of my employees. And she was my employee through after the sale. I mean, she was there almost as long as me. And so those were kind of the 2 initial like big jumps that we scaled. And the next thing that happened, we ended up having people from LA and San Francisco. I think the interesting thing to point out was those didn't work. And I think that they didn't work because initially we ended up kind of switching the model. They didn't work because these women had never come to Bump Club. And I flew out there. It was actually when I was pregnant with my second. And I would train them and teach them. Also, the cities are very different than Austin and Minneapolis. And in terms of like logistics in the city, people in San Francisco don't want to cross the Golden Gate Bridge to go to dinners. Right. So our big event that we did every month in Minneapolis and Austin and Chicago didn't work in San Francisco. And so it just was like, it showed us that you really need to know the market and know the city and the people and how they work in it before you go into the market. And so
know the city and know Bump Club. Yeah. That's the other insight. Yes. It's like you really have to be an ambassador, have experienced it. So it was sort of like you expanded from Chicago with people who were there and then we're going to other markets. Okay,
yeah,
that's great.
And so we ended up kind of closing those markets after about a year. And we didn't go back into those markets until this next big pivot that happened was we had 2 very large entities reach out to us in the same year. It was Target and Nordstrom. Mm-hmm. And they both wanted to work with us. They both wanted to partner with us. They both had initiatives in the baby space, and they felt they could not reach and engage with expectant moms. And we had them, and they knew it, and they saw it through the engagement. At this time, we had Facebook, and Instagram wasn't a thing yet, but we had Facebook, and they saw it, and they were hearing about us from brands because we were working with almost every brand in the space. And so we ended up developing 2 separate programs for separate programs for Target and Nordstrom. And what that allowed us to do, so Nordstrom events were paid for events. We went to 24 markets in about 18 months on the weekends. I was like opening the stores every weekend with a colleague of mine who was a speaker that we brought into Bump Club. He was an expert in the baby space. And so we would open up the stores every morning and host these events. And these events were driving like upwards of $50,000 of sales within a couple of hours in the baby department. And it was supporting the fact that they just started carrying strollers and car seats and all the baby gear, and no one knew that they did. So we were their vehicle to get people into the store and buy these products. And then Target was different because that really allowed us to scale. That became one of our largest running, long-standing relationships. It was, I'll get into it in a few minutes, the reason why we sold our business. It was why we sold our business. Yeah. But Target allowed us to scale in a way that allowed me to bring the DNA and the mission of Bump Club to every and any mom across the country, regardless of their socioeconomic status. And I firmly believed that any woman deserved to have the quality education and information that Bump Club provided. And Target allowed us to do that because these were free events in store. Target paid us, brands paid us. We figured out an amazing program that allowed brands to get merchandising credits for being a part of our events. And we hosted these events. We would sometimes have like 200-300 women show up and line up at these stores, and we would take over the baby department, set it up theater style. It was like a whole plan. And that ended up being, those 2 things really put us on the map for the long run. And when we would go into these different cities through those events and see which ones worked, then I would hire a market leader.
Got it.
And then we would bring we had our own event series called Gearapalooza that then we would loop back around with Gearapalooza.
What do you think it was? So tons of people now launch communities. There's all kinds of stuff, right? And trying to capture attention of these big behemoths like Target or Nordstrom's. Was it the brand you built? Was it your relationships? Was it there are all of these communities. What was it that got their attention and got them to choose you? It might have been that you were the only one at that time, but I'm just thinking about all of the listeners who are building these communities and desperately want to do what you did. What do you think attributed to it?
I don't want to say it was me. It wasn't me, but it was the fact that like me and my team showed up authentically. And I know authentic is such an overused word right now, but we literally showed up as ourselves from day one.
Yep.
Talking about all the crap that comes with pregnancy very honestly.
Yep. We
put our faces on things and we had a connection with our community. There would be people who would come to events just to meet me, and it was so flattering, and they felt like they knew me, and like and it was amazing. They would be like, "Oh my God," I would be stopped on the street. They'd be like, "Oh my God, I read your blog post about gestational diabetes." Me too. And like, I was really open and honest, and there were other people in the space. At the time were like, I had one very main competitor who I actually became friends with. I had dinner with her just a month ago when I was in New York. Funny enough, it's so crazy. But I had a very big competitor, and I would say they also sold, funny enough, but their business was a little bit different. Like you saw them, but you didn't see them because they didn't talk about their experiences as moms and what they went through. They were a different kind of face of their brand, and it was different.
Okay, so this is really important because your business was built as much upon you as it was the business itself, which typically can be a threat to a sale of a business. And yet, along comes some interest from acquirers, including brand connections. So talk to me a little bit. Now we're where, 2019, 18?
They came to me in 2018.
2018, okay. Talk to me about when you start to, you form these key partnerships, which people want, right? They want Target or they want Nordstrom or they want any of these things, and you start getting some interest. And now this starts to get real, this idea of selling. Had you ever thought about selling before? Like when you started it, did you think I'm going to grow this and sell it? Or were you just doing it to do it?
No. So I did think about selling it. And actually it's funny because when they came to me in 2018, I had recently hired like a fractional CFO, and I had said to her, I really want to get this business into a place where we can sell it or do something with it. Yep. Like I said, my goal is when I turn 40, I want to have something done with this business. I'm not going to be a mom of young kids forever, and I don't need to be hawking strollers. So like, right. I was one of these people who knew everything about every piece of baby gear, but it would be weird at 40 to 45 to be talking about things I was no longer using. And I realized this was a life stage business for me. I had people say, oh, maybe you should get you should fundraise. But I was like, what am I going to do with that? Like, I don't have tangible costs. Like, yes, I can hire people, but like, it was like a weird, like I didn't.
It was really you. It was you and, the part-time moms that you hired to help bring.
I did have full-time employees. I did have 8 of them at the time.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
But it was primarily, it's your vision. You have no, at the end of the day, what you were selling was a services-based business, right?
Correct.
So you decide you're not going to fundraise, you're going to build it to sell it. And what happens?
So we were in the process of starting to get started, and I had 3 entities reach out to me on LinkedIn, which is actually crazy because there are so many times that even today, like I go into my LinkedIn and I'm like, what is this? You know what I mean? And I'm like, now I know better because I do respond. But I thought the woman who reached out to me from Brand Connections, I thought I knew her. And I wrote back and said, sure, like I'll get on the phone with you. And I got on the phone with them. It was a different woman who I got on the phone with. And it was very evident they were interested in my relationship with Target. Brand Connections did a lot with Target in the beauty space, and they wanted to get into the baby space, and they couldn't because Target was like, well, we have a partner, a trusted partner in the baby space, and that was a big thing. Like, you can't just go into baby and be like, we're going to have events and people are going to come. Moms need to have that connection with the entity to show up. They're not just going to show up because it's Target.
Yep.
Target knows nothing about baby. You know what I mean? In theory, they're not experts. So that's why they had reached out to me. And at the end of this initial conversation, she said to me, well, would you ever sell your company? And I was like, yes, I would. And so that really put like the ball in motion. But meanwhile, I was also reached out to by Some Spider. Some Spider is the acquirer of Scary Mommy. And I have interviewed Jill Smokler on my podcast. I have become friends with her. But in the due diligence before I even went there, because I had a flight book to go there, they very much wanted an acquihire, and they wanted to hire me and dissolve my brand and have me build what I built for Bump Club for Scary Mommy. And I had no interest in that. Like, my brand had a lot of equity. I had no interest in that. And so
especially, well, you knew that it was a life stage business,
Yes.
which is what you said. So like, why would you continue? That doesn't fit strategically for you. But you are now a strategic acquisition because Brand Connections can't get in with Target without getting in with Bump Club. So that makes you inherently more valuable.
In the baby space. They were already
Yes.
in the beauty space, but in the baby
Yes.
space, they knew that we would be an in for them. And so that was really what catapulted the conversation. And so it actually was kind of fast. We closed on the sale January 1st, 2019, like on New Year's Day. And then my company rolled into Brand Connections. And so, there was a lot of due diligence. I went out there. I think I only went out there once. They might have come to me once, but I went out there one time. And my team didn't know. Like, I didn't tell them until they needed to know. And that was how the sale went down.
When they're valuing you, and I know we're not going to talk about the sale price today, but they're valuing you, are they looking at revenue? Are they looking at EBITDA? You're over $1 million now. You're at like 1.17, right? Something like this when you said, Okay. So how are they approaching the valuation? And did it jive? Did you feel happy when they first presented you with the offer?
So they actually looked at both revenue and EBITDA, to be honest. So they valued my brand in a multiple of 3.5 time multiple that they valued my brand. But when they structured my deal, my earnout was based on the EBITDA and the growth of the EBITDA. Does that make sense?
Yes. So you had to get 3x off of revenue. Then you get a certain amount up front, and the rest you have to earn off of maintaining revenue growth and margin, right?
Correct.
So I would imagine that the entire number of the potential of what you could get felt very alluring.
It did. But it also, like, we definitely negotiated. There were definitely negotiations. It wasn't like I just took what it was. The way that they described it to me when we were selling was they were like, we're going to give you rocket fuel to build your business, and we're going to let you maintain and manage your brand. And we just want to help you, like, make this explode. And I gave them a whole plan of, like, this is what needs to happen in order to continue to scale and grow this business. And a big part of that, a huge part of that, was a plan to not phase me out, but sort of. Like, phase me out as the face and bring in multiple moms to be the face of Bump Club, all different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, religions, races, etc. Yep. And so, that was a very big part of it. So that's kind of how it went down.
Makes complete sense. So you present this plan. You say, okay, you're going to give me this percentage up front. We're going to do the rest. We're going to make a plan. We're going to grow it. You're giving me rocket fuel, so it's going to be no problem really growing this and hitting my targets and doing everything that we need. And it all sounds wonderful. And very quickly, here you go. Then you tell the team, what did you get, a large percent upfront, or did you get like half upfront? How much do you end up usually taking upfront in a deal of this type of size?
It was not half.
It wasn't half. It was less than half.
Mm-hmm. It was less than half.
So they give you a portion up front. They're pouring the rest in as rocket fuel. They say, okay, let's go. Let's get it. And then you tell the team. How does the team react?
So the team knew something was going on because I had to take this trip to Orange County. We were all in Las Vegas for our big trade show, and I wasn't going home with them. So I was like, I have some meetings, possible investors, and I said, and I'm going to go check it out. So they kind of knew a little bit that something was going on. But the way that it went down was I had to tell them, like, in December, like before the close, because we had to get them into the system of the new company before the first of the year. So it was really stressful because it really wasn't even a done deal, but it was like right before the holidays also. And so the whole thing was just very stressful. They were very excited. I think they also saw it as an opportunity. I will say one of the biggest things that I tell any founder who's selling is you have to think about your people. And I always thought about my people. I mean, going into this, there were times that I paid them and not me. I mean, my people always came first. That's a good founder does that. Mm-hmm. And so when I was negotiating with the company, it was very important to me. My team had a lot of flexibility. I built this company so that moms could work and not feel bad about working. I walked the walk and talked the talk. Like, if you wanted to work at midnight, then work at midnight. Like, It didn't matter to me. So flexibility was really key for my team. And also, we didn't have a vacation policy. It was unlimited because everyone always checked in. And so, when I was negotiating with Advantage, who was the most corporate of corporate, they were like, your team's going to get 14 days of vacation. I was like, no, they're not. I said, they absolutely are not. We are operating under my guys. And I said, you can give them vacation days, but I said, it's not going to be 2 weeks. And
I had the same thing. This is all the same. Yes, because you don't want how your team is treated matters, and you need to make the acquisition appealing for them. And if all of a sudden they're going from unlimited PTO to 10 days, like, it's really a big problem.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk to you about something you've talked publicly about before, which is the earnout, and that you didn't hit it. And I want to talk about how difficult and challenging earnouts can be, because I think that this is something that a lot of founders who sell go through and we don't always talk about. So talk to me about after the sale, we go in and here you are facing.
And I'm happy to talk about this, because this is the part that I think that, to your point, we don't talk about. And we don't talk about it because we think we're a failure, which I went through that for a long time. I really felt like I was a failure until someone was like, you're one of 1% of women who have sold their company. You didn't fail. But it really took me a long time to get there. So when we moved into the company, for the first couple months, maybe the first quarter, I was like the shiny new object. They were taking me to all the different markets because they own a million different companies. And they were trying to leverage me with other deals. And it really wasn't working. It wasn't they didn't seem to have a plan for me at the company. And my team didn't even have computers until 6 months in, company computers, which is crazy to me. We weren't even integrated, so it was very evident to me that I was going to have to be my own advocate, and I was going to really have to push back. But there were things that were in my contract that didn't come to fruition, and there were things that were not in my contract, but they said would happen that they wouldn't put in my contract that didn't come to fruition. So I say this for two reasons, because a lot of people are like, well, why didn't you sue them? It's really hard as an individual to sue a multi-billion-dollar company with a legal team the size of, a small corporation. And they knew, I believe, I'm hypothesizing, they knew that I was not going to use every last dime that they paid me for the sale of my company and all of my hard work to turn around and sue them. I have in writing and in emails that they were in breach of my contract. And I have that. There was a moment where I was really pushing back on them, and I was threatening to leave, and we were trying to reopen my contract and to add an addendum to it.
Yes.
And we had an agreement that we were going to do that, and COVID happened. But the interesting thing about COVID happening was I ended up saving a $1.5 million deal with Target that was supposed to be in store, and I had the idea to make it a virtual event before virtual events were even a thing, and I saved that revenue, and they did not reopen my contract, and they should have. But there were a lot of bumps in the road, I think, on both ends. And in the beginning, and had that first year been a little bit smoother and operated like the second year, I do believe we could have made my earnout. And it was a very hard thing, and it was a very emotional thing, because I felt oh my God, they bought my baby and they're not taking care of it. And to them, it was just an acquisition, but to me, it was my livelihood. Around 2020, summer of 2020, it was very evident to me that my values didn't align with theirs in a lot of ways. And I was I need to start planning this exit strategy, because this is just not working. And I saw that they were not going to reopen my contract. And I felt why am I working for someone, yes, I had a nice 6-figure salary. It was great, especially during COVID when people were being let go, and I had the flexibility to work, and I was doing still something that I loved and believed in. But I was I cannot do this forever. I have so much more potential. And that's how I felt.
I want to know if during the dating period, you said it happened very fast, were the red flag, looking back, in a marriage that doesn't work, if you look back, you're oh man, I don't know. As somebody who had an early divorce, when I look back, I'm like, oh, what the heck was I thinking there? Were there red flags that you missed?
There weren't. Early on in the dating period, they were amazing to me. There were not red flags. I think the biggest red flag was through negotiations. There were a couple things they said no to that I wanted, but I was willing to compromise on because I was willing to make the deal. And let me tell you, the one thing people ask me all the time is do you regret it? I don't, because keep in mind, I had a business that was largely based on in-person events, and all of my competitors went out of business during COVID, and we did not. I don't, because I would have gotten zero for this business, and I would not have gone through the experience of selling it had I not negotiated this way. So there were a couple things, sure. I will tell you when I started realizing was when the woman who led my acquisition left very quickly. She left 6 months after, and I was like, oh my God, this woman kind of left me high and dry. And the woman she reported to, I think, saw that I was being a little difficult. I was asking a lot of questions, and I was asking for them to reopen my contract, and I was saying, you didn't meet your need here. And she pawned me off on someone else. And literally, I'm not kidding when I tell you this, I didn't hear from this woman for the last 18 months of me being at this company, and she was the president of the division of the company. Later on, she came back to me and apologized. I got an apology in my LinkedIn. And, I just, as a leader, you can't, you just can't do that. And she had someone very capable that was running my business and helping me, and she was amazing, but she also wasn't in charge of the sale. And the person who was running my business at the time, this is actually crazy, didn't know anything about social media and was not on social media. And that was our whole business. Mm-hmm. And so she would say things to me and tell me to do things. And I was like, that's not how it works.
Yeah. It's very, very hard, I found, when you give up control of your business, but you're still there, and you have people who have no idea about what you do or how you do it telling you what to do. It's just a very, very uncomfortable position. Did you stay through the entirety of the contract of the Earnout? No, you left.
Here was the thing. I started the conversation. I told my manager in January of 21 that I wanted to leave. And I don't know if it was no one believed me. I don't really know. She ignored me, essentially, for a long time. And I told her again, and she ignored me. And then I remember very vividly, I was sitting in my parents' driveway in Detroit, and I was on the phone with her. It was Memorial Day weekend. And I said, I just want you to know that July 23rd is going to be my last day here. And so if you would like to address it and talk about it, and that would be awesome, because a lot of the knowledge of the brand is still in my head. You have not extracted it, including the Instagram password, which you don't know. No one knew it. I was the only one who had it. And I said, and so, we have to come to an agreement. And, we started this negotiation, and they wanted me to consult. They came back. I had said to them, I will stay till the end of the year for this amount of money. And they were like, we don't pay people to leave. And I said, okay, so come back to me with some kind of opportunity. And they were like, we'll pay you to consult for X amount of days. Give us your rate. And I gave them my rate, and they were like, no, we'll pay you half that. Half. I was like, fuck you. I literally was like, fuck you. No, I'm not taking that. I'm worth more than that. You need this information. If you want it, we can have it. These conversations with our lawyers, with everything, went until the night before my deadline to them. And what ended up happening was we were on this call, and the two male attorneys were in a pissing match with each other about all this stuff. I said, stop. I said, it's enough. I said, I just want to tell you this. I said, I don't want your fucking job. I don't want to work at your company. I don't want to be there. I said, but I do want to make good for my employees and for the millions of people in our community who have come to rely on me every single day. You need me for that. So the agreement is going to be either this, this, and this, and you remove this and you pay me this, and I will consult until the end of, I think it was the end of August or beginning of September, and you can get all this information, or I'm going to leave tomorrow. And I said, and that's it. And that's just what it's going to be. And he was like, well, I need more time. I said, you are out of time. You have asked for more time.
You gave them time. You gave them time.
And I said, and I'm done. I said, I am done. My kids are going to camp this weekend, and I am going to drop them off without this hanging over my head. And by 7 p.m., I had my revised contract. on my desk, and we signed it, and I ended up consulting for them. It was like 10 hours a week until the beginning of September. And I will tell you, the very last day, the very last thing that they got was the Instagram password. And when I closed my computer, my phone rang, and it was the woman who was kind of like my liaison at the company at the time. And I remember I said to her, I was like, I got to call you right back. When I had closed my computer, I had a very physical, like visceral reaction.
Yes.
And I fainted. I blacked out at my desk, and I called my husband. I was like, Daniel, I fully believe it was like the release of all this pent up stress. Before I became a consultant, that's when I announced my departure, and no one knew at that point that I was leaving. And so during that consulting period, it was kind of like a mourning period for me. Like, I was sitting Shiva. I came to terms with the fact that I was no longer going to be the face of Bump Club anymore, and that I was leaving. And so when I did finally close my computer on that last day, I was okay. I had gone through that process. I had mourned. I realized that this wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. And it took some time for me to understand that it was exactly what I needed it to be.
I can completely and totally relate to this as the negotiation after my own earnout and exit, and the feeling of the, oh shit, like when you close the computer and like how wild it is that you're suddenly free and it leaving your body, like almost like the toxicity of it, right? It's like that moment and the like, yeah. And also like the hard parts of it and the good parts of it, right? Like the goodbye, the whole, it's wild. Okay, Lindsay, this is fabulous. And thank you so much for sharing this. Tell me what you're doing now, what you're doing next, where your heart is, what's filling your soul. Give it to me.
Yes. So I am like happier than I've ever been. And, you know, when I left Bump Club, I initially was kind of like, I'm taking clients. Like Bump Club was my first client. And I built a business with zero marketing dollars on organic marketing strategies. Yep. And so now I teach others how to do that. I call it Marketing Made Simple. I have a method called Sweep where it is really how you sweep your message throughout all your content. And that is what I teach other female founders. So I do have big brands who bring me in as a consultant. I have a lot of amazing consulting projects, but I have started a group mentorship called Marketing Made Simple for Small Business. I have 75 women in it right now. And every week we meet and I teach them how to market their business, and I teach them the strategies and the tactics that I use to build my own business. And that's basically what I'm doing. I have a podcast called Dear Found Her, which we're going to continue your story on Dear Found Her, which I'm so excited about. And because I feel like this was such a one-sided conversation. And
it's supposed to be.
I know, but then that's why you're going to come share your story.
I will.
Dear Found Her. And so I have a podcast, and, you know, really and truly, when I left, I left with the mission of helping other female founders and small business owners. And I said, if I can help one person, I have done my job. Yeah. And I've now helped hundreds, if not thousands. And so I really feel like I am in a place where I'm supposed to be. And it took that experience of building, scaling, selling, and really not having it be roses and rainbows and unicorns to be able to get to this place. And I really believe I'm in the place I'm meant to be right now.
I feel you and I see it. It comes right across, like just your energy of living in the place where you're supposed to be. And it's really just so beautiful, Lindsay. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really, really appreciate it.
Carrie, thank you so much for giving me the space to share this, because it's, you know, you don't get to share this every day. And I do think that other female founders need to hear these things. And also, if not to learn from them, but to know that they're not alone.
Absolutely.